I saw the world vanish in 72 hours, and I was left behind. Jesus showed me the 3 signs before the great vanishing.
My name is Lena Vasquez, and I never imagined that one day I would stand before people, not as a nurse in a busy emergency room, but as a fragile woman carrying a testimony that weighs heavier than any burden I have ever known. This is not a story of comfort or entertainment. It is a message, one that presses urgently against my heart, and I believe with everything in me that it will soon unfold upon this world. When I ask you to listen until the end, I am not trying to hold your attention for my sake. I am pleading with you because what I saw and what I experienced was not about me at all. It was about every soul who still has breath, every heart still beating, every person who thinks tomorrow will always come. The truth is, tomorrow is not promised. I had to die to understand that. For years, I lived with a quiet numbness. Working in the emergency room drained me of compassion. Every night, I saw the endless cycle of broken bodies, wasted lives, reckless decisions. I told myself that faith was for the naive, for those who couldn't face reality. I buried the God of my childhood under the rubble of overdoses, drunk driving accidents, and children crying for parents who never woke up again. My soul hardened, not because I wanted it to, but because it seemed like the only way to survive. But then came the night when survival was taken from me. A sudden collision, water filling my car, and the terrifying awareness that all my strength was useless. As I fought against death, a bitter thought ran through me. So this is it? After all the lives I tried to save, I die like this. And then, silence. Darkness. The end I thought I understood. Except it wasn't the end. What awaited me beyond that silence was not emptiness, but presence. Not cold void, but a voice that pierced deeper than any cry I had ever heard in the hospital. A voice that called me by name, Lena. In that moment, I knew without doubt that it was him. The Jesus I had rejected, the Jesus I had blamed, the Jesus I had tried to erase from my memory. And this Jesus did not come with accusation. He did not come with condemnation. He came with urgency. He came with a message that shook me to the core. You must see what is coming. That is why I am here. That is why I speak. Not because I am brave, but because I am terrified of staying silent. You may doubt me, dismiss me, or call me delusional. But if even one heart chooses to listen, if even one soul pauses to reconsider the path they are on, then every word will have been worth it. For 8 years I worked as a nurse in the emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital in Phoenix. That job shaped me, scarred me, and slowly drained the faith out of me. I used to walk those hallways with confidence, thinking my skills and training were enough to fight death. But over time, I realized how powerless I truly was. No matter how many times I pressed against a chest, no matter how many drugs we pushed through and for, no matter how fast we worked as a team, death always won some battles. And with every loss, a part of me hardened. I told myself that this was life, that faith was a luxury for people who didn't see what I saw every day. I watched mothers scream over lifeless children, young men destroyed by addiction, fathers who never made it home because of one bad decision on the road. And somewhere in between those endless tragedies, I stopped believing in God. Or maybe I should say, I convinced myself he wasn't there because it felt easier than believing he was and choosing to stay silent. When I finally died, I thought it was just another statistic. Another name to be written down, another body to be covered with a sheet. But I was wrong. My death was not the end. It was the beginning of a truth I was never prepared to face. Coming back from that place was not like waking up from a dream. It was like being torn from eternity and forced back into time. And the weight of what I carried made it impossible to pretend life was the same. Because Jesus did not simply let me glimpse the other side to comfort me. He gave me a message, one that people would resist, ignore, or even mock. A message no one wanted to hear because it demanded a choice. The hardest part of all this is not that I died. The hardest part is that I came back knowing I would be rejected. Friends, coworkers, even family, when I tried to share what I had seen, They looked at me like I was broken, like grief or trauma had twisted my mind. And maybe you will think the same. But I have to tell it anyway because silence would mean betraying the mercy I was given. You see, the message I returned with is not a soft promise of endless chances. It is a warning, not born out of cruelty, but of love, a final chance for souls to wake up before time runs out. I understand now why no one wants to hear it. Warnings are uncomfortable. They force us to confront the truth we'd rather push aside. But love sometimes comes as a shout, not a whisper. And that is why I speak. July 12th, 2025 began like any other night in the ER, endless noise, endless suffering, endless attempts to hold back death. By the time my shift ended, I was exhausted, my body aching, my mind numb. I told myself I was strong enough to keep going, but the truth is I was only surviving. When I finally got into my old car and started the drive home, I didn't expect my life to end within minutes. The collision came without warning. One moment I was on the road, and the next, a semi-truck ignored the red light and crushed into me with a force I can't even put into words. The world spun, metal screamed, and then I felt the plunge, the car sinking into water, dark and merciless. In that instant, my training as a nurse meant nothing. I knew all the steps of saving a drowning patient, but none of them applied when it was me, strapped to a seat, water rising past my chest. Panic took over. My fists hit the window, my nails clawed at the seatbelt, my lungs burned for air. And yet, beneath all the struggle, another feeling crept in. Anger. Anger at the unfairness of it all. Anger at the countless nights I gave to others, only to end here alone. Anger at a God I had stopped believing in, yet now I found myself blaming him anyway. My last thought before the water covered me completely was bitter. So this is how it ends? After everything I gave, after every life I tried to save, I die like this. It was not a prayer. It was an accusation, shouted in silence, hurled at the heavens. And then everything stopped. No more struggle, no more sound, no more pain. Just stillness. I thought death would be nothingness, an empty void, the final silence. But what came next was not absence, it was presence. A reality stronger than the world I left behind. I want you to understand this. I did not step into a dream. I stepped into a truth that was more real than the hospital, more real than the water, more real than my own heartbeat. It was as if my soul had been stripped bare, forced to confront the one thing I had denied for years, that I was never in control, that every breath I ever took was grace. That night, July 12th, was supposed to be my ending. But in the hands of God, it became the beginning of a message that would demand everything from me. A message that I knew would not be welcomed, but one I could not escape. The moment the water swallowed me, everything froze. My body stopped fighting, my thoughts stopped racing, and the suffocating fear gave way to a stillness I had never known. Then, without warning, I was no longer inside the car. I was standing, if you can call it standing, in a space unlike anything I had imagined. It was not dark. It was not cold. It was warmth that wrapped around me, light that did not blind me, peace that asked nothing in return. When I looked down, I saw the earth. Not the world I had known in chaos and pain, but something alive, radiant, pulsing with a beauty that left me breathless. Every color was sharper, every movement filled with meaning. It was as though the earth itself had been renewed, showing me a glimpse of what God had intended from the very beginning. And in that holy stillness, a voice came. Not through my ears, but through every part of me, my mind, my heart, my very soul. The voice said my name, Lena. I knew instantly who it was. I had doubted him for years, pushed him away, told myself he was silent. But here he was, Jesus, speaking to me with a gentleness so powerful it made me feel both exposed and embraced at once. Tears I didn't know I still had began to fall. In that moment I realized how wrong I had been. My years of anger, of cynicism, of hiding behind the armor of my profession, all of it melted like wax before the fire of his presence. And yet, There was no condemnation in his voice. Only love. Only urgency. He said, "You must see what is coming." And with those words, I felt the weight of a mission pressing against my soul. This was not about curiosity or comfort or even me. This was about humanity, about every heart that still beats on that earth I had just looked upon. I wanted to stay in that peace forever, but I knew I could not. I had been shown something, entrusted with something, and it demanded to be spoken. Even if people laughed, even if they turned away, even if no one wanted to hear it. Because once you have heard the voice of Jesus, you cannot return unchanged. And that is why I tell this story, not to glorify myself, but to remind you, He is real. He is calling, and He is giving us a final chance. If you believe His mercy is still reaching for us, comment Amen below. May the Lord bless everyone who responds in faith. When His voice entered me, it was not sound but life itself. Every word pressed against the walls of my heart, cutting through years of doubt, fear, and bitterness. "You must see what is coming," Jesus said. And I understood in an instant that this was not a suggestion. It was not even simply a warning. It was an invitation to witness truth, truth that would not only change me, but truth that would demand a response from everyone who heard it. For so long, I had built walls around myself. I told myself that faith was weakness, that hope was a lie, that prayer was nothing more than words lost in the air. But when Jesus spoke, those walls collapsed as though they had never been there. In His voice was authority that made resistance impossible, and yet, in the same breath, there was tenderness, like the voice of someone who had never stopped loving me, even when I had turned away. I trembled, not from fear of punishment, but from the weight of love that I did not deserve. Why me? Why show me? Why speak to someone who had doubted Him for so long? The answer was not given in explanation, but in presence. Jesus did not justify Himself. He simply revealed Himself. And in His presence, I realized the greatest tragedy was not that people die, it is that they live without knowing Him. When He said, "You must see what is coming," I felt the gravity of it. Humanity was not ready. The world was busy with its noise, with its pursuits, with its endless distractions. Few were listening, fewer still were willing to change. And yet, His mercy remained. He was still reaching, still calling, still warning. Not because He delights in fear, but because He longs for hearts to turn before it is too late. At that moment, I knew my life would never return to what it was. The Lena who had dismissed God was gone. What stood in her place was someone who had been chosen, not because she was righteous, but because she was available. Chosen to carry a message that no one wants to hear, but everyone needs. And the message is this: the signs are near, the time is short, and the choice each of us makes will echo for eternity. Jesus did not speak further.
He simply allowed me to see.
Suddenly, my gaze was drawn to the heavens, and I knew without being told that it was September 2025. The first thing that appeared was the moon. It turned a deep crimson, not like the pale red of an eclipse, but as though it was bleeding. The whole world paused to watch, and I could feel the trembling of human hearts beneath it. Some hearts bent in awe, others froze in terror. Then the stars began to move. Not falling, not scattering, but aligning, like unseen hands were rearranging the universe. Slowly, steadily, they formed the shape of a cross directly above Jerusalem. It blazed with a light more brilliant than the sun, yet it did not blind. And as it shone, I understood, this was not just a cosmic event. It was a declaration. Heaven itself was testifying that Jesus is real, that He has not forgotten His people, that the time of mercy is nearing its end. My heart broke as I witnessed humanity's reaction. Some fell to their knees, surrendering at last. Others covered their ears and cursed the sky, unable to bear the weight of truth. And many simply stood, stunned and speechless, caught between belief and denial. Inside me, something shifted. For years I had accused God of silence, of absence. But now I saw the truth. He had never been absent. He had been patient. Patient beyond anything we deserve. Even in this final hour, He was giving signs so clear no one could claim ignorance. But clarity does not guarantee surrender. That was the pain in his voice, the sadness that lingered in the vision. These signs were not meant to impress, but to awaken. They were love's final cry to a sleeping world. As I stood in that holy space, I realized this vision was not for me alone. I was being entrusted with a witness for others. And that terrified me more than death ever had. Because carrying truth means facing rejection. It means risking ridicule. It means losing the comfort of silence. Yet as the crimson moon glowed and the cross blazed in the heavens, I knew I could not keep quiet. If heaven was willing to rearrange the stars to speak, how could I refuse to echo that voice on earth? Then came the sound. I have no human words to describe it. It was not like music, but it carried beauty deeper than any melody. It was not a song, but it had harmony that touched the soul. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the sky, the ground, even from within my own chest. It was as though creation itself was singing. And yet, what struck me most was not the sound itself, but the way it divided hearts. Some who heard it fell to their knees instantly, tears streaming as if their spirits had finally come home. They recognized the sound, not with their ears, but with their souls. It was the voice of heaven calling them back. Others, however, clutched their ears, screamed, and ran as though it were torture. To them, the sound was unbearable, exposing every hidden sin, every wound, every lie they had tried to bury. The same sound that brought peace to one soul brought torment to another. And in that moment, I understood something I had never learned in all my years working in the hospital. It is not circumstances that separate people. It is the condition of the heart. The same presence of God can be heaven to one and hell to another, depending only on whether the heart is surrendered or resistant. I thought of my own life, how many times I had resisted, how often I had chosen bitterness instead of trust. And I realized, had I heard the sound in those years, it would have crushed me. But here I was, broken open, finally ready to receive it. Jesus spoke again, not loudly, not with thunder, but with a quiet authority that filled me. This is the dividing line. What they carry in their hearts will determine how they hear my voice. The sound continued, weaving through every soul on earth, pulling some closer, pushing others away. I felt grief rise within me, not because God was unjust, but because he was so just, so true, that no one could escape the truth of who they really were. That day, I saw clearly. The greatest battle is not between nations, not even between good and evil as we imagine it. The greatest battle is inside the human heart, whether to bow in surrender or to fight in pride. Jesus looked at me with a gaze that pierced deeper than any words could. There will be 3 signs, he said. And after the third, humanity will have only 72 hours to act. The weight of his words pressed heavily on me. 3 signs. A final warning before the world crossed into something irreversible. My heart trembled as I realized these were not symbols meant for theologians to debate. They were clear, visible events that every person, believer or skeptic, would witness. No one could deny them. No one could claim ignorance. And then he showed me what would follow. In an instant, I saw people across the globe, millions, disappearing. Not in chaos, not in fear, but with peace on their faces, as though they had been waiting for this very moment. Their bodies did not fall lifeless. Instead, they were lifted, caught up, leaving behind only their clothes, their shoes, their earthly possessions. It was the rapture, the gathering of those who had chosen him, those who had bent their hearts before his mercy. What struck me most was not only the vanishing itself, but the contrast it revealed. The ones who disappeared carried a light I could see, a glow of surrender that set them apart. And those who remained, they were left broken, confused, desperate, unable to understand why they had been left behind. I felt sorrow pierce through me. Not because Jesus had deceived anyone, he had been warning all along, but because so many had hardened their hearts until the last possible moment. And now, time had run out for them. Jesus' voice grew softer, yet the weight of his words grew heavier. I want all to come, but not all will choose me. After the third sign, their choice will be sealed. I wanted to cry out, to argue, to plead that surely there was another way. But deep inside, I knew the truth. Love had already made a way at the cross. And now, every heart would reveal where it stood in the face of that love. I stood there, undone, realizing the magnitude of the calling placed upon me. I was to carry this testimony back to a world that did not want to hear it, a world that would mock, dismiss, or fear it. But silence was no longer an option. This is why I speak. Not because it is easy, but because eternity is at stake. If you believe his warning is still echoing for us today, comment Amen below. May the Lord bless those who listen and prepare their hearts. What shook me most was not the vision of the moon or the cross in the sky. It was the moment when Jesus showed me my own face, still standing on the earth after the rapture. I saw myself, waiting, hoping, yet left behind. That image broke something deep inside me. I wanted to cry out, "Why me? Why show me this if I am not even saved?" But his answer came like a whisper, heavy with mercy. Because you have a choice. You must carry my message to those who will remain. They still have time, but someone must tell them. It was then that he showed me the faces. Joshua, the drug dealer who lived only 3 blocks from my apartment, Patricia, the official at City Hall who took bribes with a smile, and my own mother, Rosa, with whom I had not spoken in 2 years. Each face pierced me differently. Joshua with desperation, Patricia with pride, and my mother with a wound that never healed. And yet, each of them mattered to him. He wanted me to warn them. When I returned to life, gasping in the ER, the world told me I had been unconscious for 3 minutes. But I knew I had been somewhere far beyond time, and that somewhere had given me a mission that would not let me rest. In the days that followed, the visions didn't stop. They grew sharper. At first, they were small, a patient entering the ER with injuries I had already seen in a dream, a news headline repeating words I had heard in that holy place. They were not random. They were confirmations, gentle reminders that what I had seen was real. Each sign felt like both a gift and a burden. I could no longer deny the truth, but neither could I escape the weight of it. Every time I tried to push it away, another vision came. Faces I had never met, situations I had not lived yet, all pressing me toward one conclusion. This message was not for me alone. And so the struggle began, not against death, but against myself. Part of me wanted to run, to bury the visions, to live like nothing had happened. But another part, the part that had heard his voice, knew I had no choice. To be silent would be the same as betraying him. I was left with one reality. I had been chosen to warn, not because I was worthy, but because his mercy was relentless. I remember sitting at the edge of Henry Campbell's hospital bed, my hands trembling as I tried to put into words what I had seen. Henry was a man ravaged by cancer, his body frail, yet his eyes carried a strength I envied. For weeks, I had avoided telling anyone about the visions. Fear of ridicule, fear of rejection, fear of sounding insane kept me silent. But Henry was different. He was a retired pastor, a man whose life had been shaped by faith, and I sensed that if anyone could understand, it would be him. When I finally poured out my story, the accident, the voice of Jesus, the crimson moon, the cross in the sky, Henry did not laugh. He did not look at me with pity. He simply listened, his breathing shallow but steady, his gaze never leaving mine. And when I finished, exhausted and unsure, he whispered the words that burned into me. "Lena, God does not give visions to perfect people. He gives them to those who will act." Those words broke me open in a way nothing else had. For so long, I had believed God couldn't use me because I was too broken, too cynical, too scarred by my past. I thought only saints, only the righteous, only the unblemished could carry his message. But Henry's words turned that lie into dust. It wasn't about perfection. It was about obedience. I sat there in silence, tears streaming, realizing that the question was no longer, "Why me?" but "Will I obey?" Henry placed his weak hand over mine. The world is blind, Lena. They need someone who is seen. Don't waste what you've been given. Even if they reject you, even if they mock you, speak. God chose you not because you were strong, but because you were willing to listen. I left his room that night with my heart heavy, but alive. For the first time, I understood that my scars were not disqualifications. They were the very reason God had chosen me. Because the world didn't need polished sermons. It needed raw truth from someone who had been broken and yet found mercy. Henry's words echoed in my soul long after I walked out of that hospital. Not perfect, just obedient. And in that moment, I made a quiet vow. I would not bury this testimony. I would not let fear silence me. I would speak, even if my voice shook. The first sign came on September 3rd. I was working the night shift when it happened. Patients filled the ER, not with broken bones or bleeding wounds, but with broken spirits. Men in expensive suits sobbed over tax fraud they had hidden for years. Teenagers confessed lies to their parents. Women trembled as memories of long-buried sins resurfaced. The red moon hung outside like a mirror, forcing every soul to see itself as God sees. Some were terrified. Others found release in repentance. I stood in awe, realizing that what Jesus had shown me was unfolding before my very eyes. 6 days later, on September 9th, the second sign appeared. I was driving home when the stars began to shift. Slowly, carefully, they aligned into a cross blazing above the night sky. People poured out of their homes, staring upward in silence. Some fell to their knees, whispering prayers. Others clenched their fists and cursed, unwilling to surrender. A few simply stared, torn between wonder and fear. It was then I realized that the signs were not just cosmic warnings, they were tests of the heart. The same red moon that drew repentance from one soul drove another into panic. The same cross that moved some to worship stirred rebellion in others. These signs were not neutral, they demanded a response. And I knew my role was not to explain the signs, but to call people to prepare. To tell them what Jesus had told me. After the third sign, 72 hours would remain. Nothing more. The weight of that knowledge pressed heavily on me. How could I carry such a message to people who already thought I was unstable? How could I tell a city, a world, that their time was almost gone? Yet, as I watched the sky blazing with the cross, I remembered Henry's words. Not perfect, just obedient. I did not need perfection. I needed courage. That night, I began writing down the names from my vision, Joshua, Patricia, my mother, and others I could not yet identify. I prayed over each one, trembling, uncertain, but desperate. Because I knew that when the third sign came, the final countdown would begin. And in that moment, I understood. The signs were not given to terrify us, but to awaken us. They were mercy in the form of warning. September 12th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I will never forget that moment. The sound began low, like a vibration beneath the earth, so deep that you felt it before you could hear it. Then it rose, swelling into every corner of existence, filling the air, the ground, even the marrow of my bones. It was not simply a noise, it was a call. The sound of eternity brushing against time. Immediately, I saw the division it created. In the ER, some patients closed their eyes and smiled as if the sound wrapped them in peace. Others screamed, covering their ears, begging for it to stop. Doctors froze mid-step, nurses dropped their instruments, and across the city, people reacted with awe or with terror. For me, the meaning was undeniable. This was the third sign, the last warning, the final invitation. And with it came the countdown, 72 hours left for humanity to choose. The weight of that truth pressed down like fire on my chest. I wanted to shout it from the rooftops, to run through the streets crying out, "Do you not see? Do you not hear? Time is almost gone." But I also knew that not everyone would listen. Some would laugh. Some would dismiss it as madness. And yet, some would understand, and they were the ones I was called to reach. Inside, my fear wrestled with my obedience. I was just a woman, broken, scarred, hardly a model of faith. Yet Jesus had entrusted me with a task that felt too heavy for human shoulders. Still, Henry's words came back to me. Not perfect, just obedient. And obedience meant I could not remain silent. The sound lingered for what felt like eternity, though it was only minutes. Then it faded, leaving behind a silence almost more unbearable than the noise itself. The whole world seemed to hold its breath, waiting. I knew then. History had entered its final hours. I fell to my knees, trembling, whispering a prayer I had not dared to pray in years. Lord, make me faithful. Not strong, not wise, not eloquent, just faithful. Show me who to speak to. Lead me where I must go. Give me the courage to carry this message. Because I knew this. 72 hours is not long. And eternity is forever. The final 72 hours were the longest of my life. Every door I knocked on, every face I pleaded with carried the same weight. Time is running out. Some listened, trembling, and prayed with me. Others laughed, slamming the door in my face. A few looked at me with pity, as if I were delusional. But I could not stop. Each name on that list burned like fire in my soul. On the evening of September 15th, the silence of the city felt heavy, unnatural, as though creation itself was waiting. And then, at 11:47 p.m., it came, the trumpet sound. It was not the kind of trumpet you hear in parades or concerts. It was deeper, more beautiful, more terrifying. It seemed to come from every direction at once, above, below, within. The sound shook the very marrow of my bones. I held my breath, waiting to be lifted, waiting to disappear as I had seen in the vision. But nothing happened. The sound continued, glorious and dreadful, while I remained where I was. I ran to the window, trembling. The streets below were scattered with clothes, shirts, shoes, uniforms, abandoned in eerie silence. A nurse's scrubs by the hospital parking lot. A child's pajamas on the sidewalk. They were gone. Taken. Gathered. And I was still here. The realization crashed into me with unbearable force. I had missed it. I had been left behind. I fell to my knees, sobbing. Why, Lord? Why show me? Why warn me? If in the end I would not be taken. My cries were raw, almost angry, yet in that brokenness, something unexpected happened.
Peace.
Not the peace of being rescued, but the peace of being seen. Even in my failure, his presence was near. And I remembered his words. You have a choice. Perhaps my chance to be taken in the rapture had passed, but my chance to serve had not. The world was collapsing outside. Families were wailing, governments panicking, people searching for answers. And I realized that even though I had been left, my voice could still carry the truth. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered the first honest prayer I had spoken in years. Lord, I surrender. Even if I have to face what comes, I will not waste this. Use me even now. I rose from the floor trembling, knowing that my path would be harder than I had ever imagined. But also knowing this, God had not abandoned me. The night of the trumpet left me shattered, yet strangely whole. Yes, I had been left behind. The rapture had come, and I had not been taken. But instead of despair crushing me, I felt a peace that seemed impossible. It was not the peace of escape. It was the peace of being forgiven, even while remaining. Outside, the world descended into chaos. News reports spoke of the Great Vanishing. Governments scrambled, leaders shouted, markets collapsed. Families wailed for loved ones who were suddenly gone. Fear spread like wildfire. Yet inside me, a quiet fire burned, a conviction that God was not finished with those of us who remained. I realized that mercy was still present. It had not vanished with those who were taken. It lingered like an open door, calling out to anyone who would listen. And for the first time in my life, I wanted nothing more than to share that hope. I began speaking first to coworkers, then to strangers. Not with eloquence, but with raw truth. I told them what I had seen, what Jesus had said, and what I now knew, that even though time was short, the choice was still open. Love was still greater than hate. Forgiveness was still stronger than bitterness. Faith was still more powerful than fear. Some listened, clinging to the words like lifelines. Others mocked, saying I was delusional, that science would explain everything. But I no longer feared rejection, because I had already faced the worst truth, that I was not taken, and found peace even there. If God could meet me in my failure, He could meet anyone in theirs. And so, I became a voice in the aftermath. Not because I was brave, but because silence was no longer possible. If the great vanishing had proved anything, it was that eternity is real, and mercy is still reaching for us, even now. I carry this hope like a fragile flame in the storm, and I tell it to you now, it is not too late. As long as your heart beats, you still have a choice. If this testimony touched your heart, write Amen in the comments. May the Lord's blessing and mercy be upon you today.